From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. The trial of the Mexican drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman has finished its first day in New York City. Federal prosecutors say the presumed leader of the Sinaloa Cartel shipped massive amounts of illegal drugs to the U.S. El Chapo faces 17 criminal counts and a potential life sentence if convicted. The defense lawyers claim Guzman is but a scapegoat and the real leaders of the cartel live freely in Mexico. Meanwhile, Guzman's lawyer has said that the Sinaloa Cartel paid hundreds of millions of dollars in bribes to the current president of Mexico, Enrique Peña Nieto, and former president Felipe Calderon. Via Twitter, Calderon has denied this accusation and his involvement with the Sinaloa Cartel. A spokesperson for outgoing President Enrique Peña Nieto has denied the accusations as well. Another criminal investigation against the former president of Peru, Alberto Fujimori, is underway, this time related to mass forced sterilization of indigenous women that were carried out during his time in office. Fujimori and 3 of his former ministers have been accused of the crime. According to the Ombudsman's office, nearly 300,000 forced sterilizations were performed between 1996 and 2001. The women were reportedly threatened and sometimes forced into ongoing the procedure. Our correspondent in Peru, Jaime Herrera, has more details.
La fiscal superior Marcelita Gutiérrez.
Senior prosecutor Marcelita Gutiérrez has filed a lawsuit against former President Alberto Fujimori and 4 of his former ministers and other officials. They are being accused of crimes against humanity in regards to the forced sterilization of hundreds of thousands of indigenous women. There are even talks of 5 women who died because of this practice. Around 2,100 testimonies have been gathered from women who were forcibly sterilized as part of a birth control program imposed during Fujimori's administration. Women organizations have said there is finally going to be justice for this crime, which has long been condemned. Some of the evidence in this case are orders from the Health Ministry about sterilization quotas in health centers, especially in Quechua-speaking regions. What is known now is that in the coming days, former ministers Costa Bauer and Alejandro Aguinaga, the current doctor for Fujimori, could be called to testify.
U.S. troops in Texas have begun to lay barbed wire at the border from the various migrant caravans approaching the U.S.-Mexico border. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency has announced they will also close down lanes at the border crossing and set out barricades. This is all part of President Donald Trump's hardline stance on the caravans, which includes sending nearly 15,000 troops to the border and suspending asylum requests for anyone who enters illegally. U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis is expected to visit the border area on Wednesday. Our correspondent in Mexico, Pablo Perez, is in Jalisco and has more details about the migrants' ongoing journey.
Well, we are right now at El Arenal, Jalisco. This place is around 40 kilometers out of Guadalajara, the place where the migrant caravan stayed for the last night. And this is the place where they were taken by buses, and so far they still have to walk or travel by their own means the next 90 kilometers until the town of Ixtlán del Río, Nayarit. The next state in their route has been severely damaged by Hurricane Will. So the authorities in the state of Nayarit, they say that they cannot take care of the migrant caravan because they have their shelters occupied already with over 130 people that have been damaged in their properties by the hurricane. So what Nayarit state is offering is a bus ride from the southern border of the state to the northern border, where they are limited with Sinaloa. So right now the migrant caravan has to travel 90 kilometers until the next state, so they can ride by bus another 200 kilometers. This is gonna be one of the longest journeys in one day they have made so far, and we will keep you informed.
Thank you, Pablo, for that report. Military police in the northeast of Brazil have used force to try to break up a land occupation. About 100 police moved to the Novo Pindarme camp in the state of Piauí to evict 250 landless families who have been occupying the area for 2 years. At least one person was reportedly injured. In the last week, eviction orders have been issued against 2 other land occupations in Brazil. Still in Brazil, social movements have taken to the streets to protest against a controversial law that, if approved, will greatly censor topics discussed in schools. If the law is approved, teachers won't be able to use words such as oppression or gender, or even talk about political issues in classrooms. The law is currently being discussed in Congress. Early on Tuesday, a group of teachers and students were prevented from entering Congress to participate in the discussion.
Democracy is being attacked. We couldn't get past here and enter the room where the debate is happening. Democracy is at risk. We came with representatives from teachers and student organizations, and we were prevented from entering. They don't want to give us the right to protest against something that for us represents a major attack.
Evidence has surfaced in Colombia that shows Attorney General Néstor Humberto Martínez reportedly knew about the other bribery scheme since 2015. The information was revealed during an interview with a key witness in the corruption case, Jorge Enrique Pizano, who died a week ago. Pizano said that he met the Attorney General in 2015 and warned him of bribery. The Attorney General has rejected the accusations. In a public statement, Martinez said he did not inform the authorities about the bribes because Pizano was not sure about the bribery scheme was real. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. The former Vice President of Ecuador, Jorge Glass, has announced that he will continue his hunger strike, adding that he will no longer drink any liquids. He started the hunger strike 24 days ago to protest being transferred from a jail in Quito to the maximum security prison in La Tacunga. According to Glass, this was a political move by the current administration of President Lenín Moreno, who had declared war against former President Rafael Correa and members of his administration. Our correspondent in Quito, Denise Herrera, has more details.
Hello, yes, indeed, the Ecuadorian former Vice President Jorge Glass is on the 24th day of hunger strike. He also started refusing to eat, not only to eat food, but also to eat water. And in light of this, the Ombudsman's Office of Ecuador has published a report where they rejected this measure and also are calling to the authorities to take responsibility of the situation of Jorge Glass inside the jail in La Tacunga. Also, the judge of La Tacunga has rejected the action of habeas corpus presented by the legal team of former Vice President of Ecuador, Jorge Glass. Under this, his family and close friends of the citizen revolution movement highlighted the irregularities inside this process and legal process against Jorge Glass. Now his legal defense team also are calling to the authorities to take again Jorge Glass to jail 4, where he started his legal process. It's all for now. Back to you at the studio.
Thank you, Denise, for that report. Workers from Aerolíneas Argentinas are condemning a campaign by the ruling Cambiemos Alliance that seeks to privatize the state-owned airline. A representative from the pilots' union said the government of Mauricio Macri is trying to pit airline workers against the people. This by spreading fake news about their working conditions and wages. The union says these attacks are meant to help justify the adjustment measures imposed on the people by request of the International Monetary Fund. Campesinos in Argentina continue to be evicted from their land. That is, in spite of laws that are meant to protect them. Let's find out on this report.
Judge Olga Zulema Zapac recently ruled in favor of evicting campesino families in the province of Jujuy in Argentina, even though the law prohibits it. The judge is linked to a real estate business in the rural area.
We had been living there for 20 years until we were evicted. My mum passed away recently and they evicted us not long after.
This is a shame. We had to leave everything behind, everything we built, our corrals, our farms. We need to rebuild everything to move our cattle. This hurts me deeply.
The Diaz family is one example. They've been living in their farm for over 50 years before being evicted.
This was very rough for us. They are not just throwing us out of our homes, they are killing our culture. Our home was the last mainstay of our people in the area.
A major issue for these campesinos families is finding land where their animals can graze in order to survive, which is something that proves more difficult every day due to the rise of agribusiness.
We don't have access to water. We have to carry water for 2 kilometers. We are 8 kilometers away from the nearest road. Nothing is close to us. If it rains, we can't use the roads. We are barely getting by.
Social organizations have slammed the state for denying campesinos their right, as they often have no legal recourse.
To this day in Argentina, campesinos have been trying to have their homes legally recognized as theirs through a law that provides full ownership after a person has lived there for 20 years. But in general, these people end up being evicted because the justice system fails to recognize any improvements that have been made in the lands by the families and gives the lands to agribusiness companies.
Campesinos are still determined to fight for what's theirs. Through solidarity and effective organization, they hope to win.
Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, has said the joint natural gas deal signed with Venezuela represents a new era in regional cooperation. Trinidad and Venezuela signed a major energy cooperation deal back in August. Rowley highlighted the United States, once a major importer of gas, is now a competing exporter.
The Joaquin deal is a prime example of the symbiotic relationship between Trinidad and Tobago and its nearest neighbor, Venezuela, and an indication of cooperation among neighbors, but more importantly, among 2 founding members of the GECF member countries. Additionally, the Caribbean region is becoming a hotbed for hydrocarbon exploration. Recent successes in exploration in Guyana has prompted interest in Suriname, Cuba, Barbados, Grenada, and Guyana. These countries can benefit from Trinidad's experience in the hydrocarbon arena, while providing opportunities for Trinidad and Tobago in many aspects of the hydrocarbon value chain.
Our correspondent in Trinidad and Tobago, Kijan Haynes, brings us the details.
Now, the theme of this meeting could all be about change and adapting to change. With the United States moving from a major importer of natural gas to exporter and other shifts in the status quo, it means Trinidad now needs to figure out how to export gas to new countries. Now, some of those countries are in Asia or Africa, and that's of course much further away than the US, which means it's more expensive and more logistical to send it there. And the price of gas has not changed. And smaller countries like Trinidad and Tobago, though major exporters of natural gas, don't actually have a say in the actual setting of the gas prices. And that's why the Prime Minister called for more transparency in the way the price of natural gas is set. Now, so for countries like Trinidad and Tobago, it's all about diversifying and adapting to this new natural gas world. That could mean becoming mentors, so to speak, of other emerging markets, like in Equatorial Guinea or Ghana in Africa, or even closer to home, Guyana or Grenada. And of course, there's climate change. Prime Minister Rowley, in his address, acknowledged the importance of climate change and the move to renewable energy. But remember, natural gas is still the country's bread and butter. So he hasn't been, and probably will not be, quick to condemn non-renewable energy.
The Caribbean Court of Justice has ruled that a law in Guyana is unconstitutional. The law made it illegal for any person to appear in public while dressed as the opposite sex. The ruling in the case determined that the law was vague and violated the right to protection under the law. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. Palestinian resistance groups in Gaza have agreed to accept a ceasefire brokered by Egypt and the United Nations. However, they only agreed to halt the cross-border attacks that have been intensified over the last 48 hours, if the Israeli forces do the same. Since the attacks began on Sunday, at least 14 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli airstrikes. Meanwhile, Israeli military forces have deployed tanks to the border with Gaza as a means of reinforcing their military presence in the area. This comes after Palestinian fighters responded to recent airstrikes with a barrage of rockets fired into the southern of Israel. The Israeli ambassador to the United Nations has claimed Israel as a victim of attacks by Hamas, and therefore the Security Council must only condemn them for recent aggressions in the Gaza Strip.
Let me be clear about that. There is no such a thing, both sides. There is Hamas that attacks and fires over 460 missiles at civilians, and there is Israel that protects its people. The Security Council must only condemn Hamas today for its aggressive assault on civilians and finally designate it as a terrorist organization.
Black Tunisians have welcomed the adoption of an anti-racist law by the country's parliament. Last month, Tunisia's parliament approved a landmark law penalizing the use of racist words, inciting hatred and discriminating on racial grounds. Despite abolishing slavery in 1846, Black Tunisians, who are mostly descendants of slaves, continue to be treated as second-class citizens and face frequent racism.
People will say that there is no discrimination, but there is. People say there are no differences between a white person and a black person, but in reality it is the opposite. In reality, they despise you. The mentalities here are outdated.
The Venezuelan Minister of Industries and National Production, Tarek El Aissami, is on an official visit to Turkey as a part of a bilateral cooperation strategy. El Aissami arrived to Ankara on Tuesday and held a meeting with the Turkish Vice President Fuat Oktay. Both sides praised the meeting and hope to continue strengthening their ties. The Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum will take place in Papua New Guinea from the 17th to the 18th of November. The forum has been labeled as the biggest event to be hosted in Papua New Guinea since its independence celebrations in 1975. Leaders from 20 countries will be attending, including Chile's Sebastián Piñera, China's Xi Jinping, and the Vice President of the U.S., Mike Pence.
The visit of the President of China to Papua New Guinea is, everyone's looking forward to it. It is so historic to have the President visit, and also because your President has a connection to Papua New Guinea with a project that he was working on some time ago when he was Governor up in the Highlands. So it's really touching that he's familiar with Papua New Guinea already and the development challenges that we face. And I think people are just so extremely excited to know that he will be here soon.
Officials from the UK and the EU have agreed on a draft for a Brexit agreement after months of negotiations. Prime Minister Theresa May will be seeking for the support of her ministers at a special cabinet meeting on Wednesday. She's currently meeting ministers one by one at Downing Street to brief them on the draft agreement.
We're going to stay in the customs union on this deal. We're going to stay effectively in large parts of the single market. And that means it's vassal state stuff. we are going to, for the first time in 1,000 years, this parliament, will not have a say over the laws that govern this country. It is a quite incredible state of affairs. It will mean that we are having to accept rules and regulations from Brussels over which we have no say ourselves. It is utterly unacceptable to anybody who believes in democracy. It is not the right way forward. And there is a kicker. And the kicker is that not only are we going to remain in the customs union and in large parts of the single market, but also we will not have protected our precious union.
The German Chancellor has backed calls for a European army. Let's take a look at that and more from around the world.
The German Chancellor Angela Merkel was booed at the European Parliament in Strasbourg when she called for the creation of a real European army, adding that it should include an EU-wide arms export policy. Her announcement comes after French President Emmanuel Macron made a plea for a European army to stave off what he says are threats from Russia and China.
A united European army would show the world that between European countries there will never be another war. It will not be an army against NATO. Please don't think so. It can be a good supplement to NATO. No one wants to question the classic alliance.
Sri Lanka's Supreme Court has suspended a presidential decree to dissolve parliament and hold new elections, fueling the country's ongoing political crisis. The deputy leader of the main opposition party, Sajith Premadasa, was reported as saying the decision restored the status quo. The political discord began when the president fired the prime minister and replaced him with a pro-China former president. The decision has been met with protests.
This is a time to unite. This is a time to unite, ensure that justice and fairness prevails, that democracy is promoted and enhanced, and this should not be a time to promote political vengeance.
The Ebola outbreak in northeastern Democratic Republic of Congo that has already killed more than 200 people is expected to last until the middle of next year. That is, according to the World Health Organization. So far, it has caused 333 confirmed and probable causes in the province of North Kivu, reportedly the worst in the country's history. The epidemic has been difficult to locate due to factors such as armed conflict and population mobility.
We come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories you can find at our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.